You all must have heard about the term e-commerce a lot back in June, right? I'm guessing you all must have forgotten about that by now. So first, I apologize for this video being released this late. But let's get to it and discuss this whole e-commerce thing. So on the 21st of June 2021, Government of India put out the Consumer Protection E-Commerce Rules 2020. This was basically a revised draft of the one that was released on the 23rd of July 2020, which basically were a set of regulations for the soon to be the second biggest e-commerce market in the world, that is India's e-commerce market. But before I delve deeper and discuss the bill, let me first take you through the journey of this bill. And I promise you, it will be shorter unlike my last videos. So the journey starts in the year 2015, when the late Ram Vilas Paswan introduced the Consumer Protection Bill 2015. And it is there where we first see the mention of the word e-commerce. This bill sought to replace the 1986 one, which one had already been amended in the year 1991, 1993 and 2002. Here we see that the Government of India wanted to bring online activities under the ambit of the Act and give powers to the Central Consumer Protection Authority to start class action lawsuits against e-commerce portals as well. But we see that people were like, this ain't gonna work, man. This ain't gonna work at all. And the government was like, okay, da, we will get some separate shit for e-commerce then. So now put your lighters in the air. Just a joke, sorry. Now before I continue, let's keep the year 2016 in mind, because this is the key year when the Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion of the Ministry of Commerce and Industry introduced a circular which talked about FDI in e-commerce, and there are 4 points that we are required to keep in mind here. First point being 100% FDI under automatic route, which is basically no government permission being required, is permitted in marketplace model of e-commerce. But FDI is not permitted in inventory-based model of e-commerce. Second, e-commerce entity providing a marketplace will not exercise ownership over the inventory. Such an ownership over the inventory will render the business into an inventory-based model. Also, e-commerce entities providing marketplace will not directly or indirectly influence the sale price of goods or services and shall maintain a level playing field. Fourth point, an e-commerce entity will not permit more than 25% of sales affected through its marketplace from one vendor or their group companies. Now, why the picture of these two gentlemen on the screen? Well, I'll talk about them in some time. As I said, we will be getting back to these points once I start talking about the current one. Now we go to 2017, where the cabinet passed the Consumer Protection Bill, and then in 2018 we see it being discussed and passed in Lok Sabha. The bill was then again reintroduced in 2019 and finally passed in both houses and published in the very great Gazette of India on the August 9th, 2019. And again consequently came into force on the 20th of July 2020. One last thing, and after that I get into the e-commerce bill. So the subclause ZG of subsection 2 of section 101 of the Consumer Protection Act 2019 gives the government power to make rules to prevent unfair trade practices in e-commerce and direct selling under section 94. Now what's the section 94? Well, the section 94 of the Consumer Protection Act 2019 allows for the government to take measures to prevent unfair trade practices in e-commerce and direct selling, which basically refers to companies like Amway, where the rep comes to the customer directly and there are no physical avenues or traditional brick and mortar stores where these products can be sold. So online is chill, okay? And these were brought in basically to help the government protect the interests and rights of the customers as prescribed. Now, who are they applied to? So first, any goods or services, including digital products, which could be songs, online movies, etc., which are sold on digital and electronic networks, that includes your TVs and extranets. Now, what is an extranet? It could be a company network where a customer can connect with companies and have specific demands catered to Second, both marketplace and inventory models of e-commerce. Third, any e-commerce retail which includes multi-channel single brand retail, which is basically like brands that have both brick and mortar stores and use online avenues. All forms of unfair trade practices across all models of e-commerce. So these are being applied to that, of course. And lastly, these are actually not applied to the sellers selling on e-commerce platforms. Also, all these e-commerce entities are required to register with the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade and have that registration number nice and clear on every order invoice that they provide to the users. I'm sorry for all this history, but it is pretty important. Now let's get to the e-commerce bill. So the Government of India introduced the first draft on the 23rd July 2020 and then a revised draft on the 21st of June 2021, as I had stated earlier. Like the new IT rules, by the way, if you want to learn more about them, you can check out a 2-part video series I had made earlier on them. Here too, the e-commerce platforms are required to have a chief compliance officer, a nodal contact person, and a resident grievance officer. So this resident grievance officer is required to acknowledge the receipt of any consumer complaint within 48 hours and redress the complaint within 1 month from the date of receipt of the complaint. Also, the e-commerce platforms should display the name of the grievance officer and his contact details, as well as mechanism by which a user can make complaint against the violations of the provisions of this rule or any matter pertaining to the resources and services made available to them by this e-commerce platform on their platform, basically. Now, next up, whenever any e-commerce platform offers any imported goods for sale, as per the bill, they're required to first mention the name of the importer and the seller. Secondly, identify goods based on the country of origin and provide a filter mechanism on the website and display a notification regarding the origin of the goods at the pre-purchase stage itself. Also, at the time of the goods being viewed for purchase, suggestions of domestic alternatives, so desi alternatives, should be there to ensure a fair opportunity for domestic goods. Thirdly, it talks about providing ranking for goods and ensuring that the rank parameters do not discriminate against our domestic goods and sellers. The bill also talks about no e-commerce entity imposing cancellation charges on consumers cancelling after confirming purchase, unless similar charges are also borne by the e-commerce entity. If they cancel the purchase, order unilaterally for any reason. It then goes on to talk about how e-commerce entities shall not manipulate information about a product to have a certain user buy a product, which I believe means that the e-commerce entities can no longer create those fake ads telling you about a cheaper ergonomic chair that you have been searching online for, and after you buy it, you realize, actually this wasn't the thing I was searching for. Or that lunchbox that was supposed to be microwave friendly according to the product description, but after getting it delivered and reading the manual, you realize it isn't. But because it's past 15 days, you just gotta live with it, man. Also, whenever they are cross-selling, which is basically whenever you go to Amazon and buy a phone, you see the Scooty recommendation, right? Like saying, put that screen protector in basket also, no? Or like whenever you are buying something and have been searching for something else as well on Google and see it being recommended while you buy something on Amazon, yeah, that kind of stuff. Now see, that's allowed. But e-commerce entities should now provide info regarding first the name of the entity providing data for cross-selling, and secondly the data of such entity used for cross-selling. We then see the bill mentioning that no e-commerce entity shall permit usage of the name or brand associated with that of marketplace e-commerce entity for promotion of those goods or the sale of goods or services on its platform in a manner so as to suggest that these goods or services are associated with the marketplace e-commerce entity. So I don't know, does that mean Tata bye-bye to Amazon Basics or something? And then to the next point, which became a huge point of discussion, was that no e-commerce entity shall organize a flash sale of goods or services offered on its platform. Now, from what I understood, the ban on flash sales doesn't mean an end to the discounting fest that we have. but it means an end to the discounting fest of a specific brand or a seller which is being managed by the e-commerce entity. Which here, for example, could be Cloudtail, which, by the way, if you remember that circular from 2016 and the two gentlemen before that, it spoke about the FDI rules in e-commerce. Yeah. And after that circular, Amazon actually reduced its share in the joint venture which owns Cloudtail to 24%. And after this bill came out, they're actually going to say Tata bye-bye to this business. Like, this joint venture is actually going to say bye-bye. And by the way, before 2016 circular, nearly 1/3 of the products that were sold on Amazon were from Cloudtail. And after the circular and the whole restructuring, Amazon pulled this mass move of introducing another seller called Apparel, which was basically a joint venture like Cloudtail. And together, these two nicely have around 35% of the total sales on Amazon. Also, another fun fact about the joint venture that owns Cloudtail was that it was actually set up to help domestic sellers. Now, I don't know, but for some reason, Cloudtail has always looked like an inventory business to me, and not like, a company housing tons of retailers and helping them expand. But yeah, I really must be wrong here, because that same 2019 circular talks of 0% FDI in inventory models of e-commerce. And big companies are known to follow laws nicely and properly, so I definitely must be wrong here. Also, how can I forget this? The bill also talks about every e-commerce entity shall, as soon as possible but not later than 72 hours of the receipt of an order, provide information under its control or possession or assistance to the government agency, provided that any such order shall be in writing clearly stating the purpose of seeking information or assistance as the case may be. Now, under the liabilities of marketplace e-commerce entity, the bill mentions that they are required to mention the country of the origin of the seller company along with other info like name, address, rating, etc. It also mentions that an explanation of the main parameters, which individually or collectively are most significant in determining the ranking of goods or sellers on its platform, and the relative importance of those main parameters through an easily and publicly available description be drafted in plain and intelligible language. It then talks about how entities should ensure that none of its related parties and associated enterprises are enlisted as sellers for sale to consumers directly. Cloudtail and Apparel, I don't know. Another point that became a big point of discussion was the fallback liability, which refers to the liability of a marketplace e-commerce entity where a seller, registered with such entity fails to deliver the goods or services ordered by a customer, and this causes, of course, a loss to the customer. Basically means if I order, let's say, a heart rate monitor, and Amazon's like, sorry bro, actually can't deliver after 2 days of ordering. Now this item was essential to me. The liability now will be on Amazon, even though it was actually the seller who was like, bro, I actually can't deliver it. Now, there are many more rules for inventory e-commerce entities, but those are actually more general and in common with the ones that are present already in the Consumer Protection Act. So I won't be going over them. Now, we see that there's been commentary on both ends, there's been support and resistance. With Niti Aayog saying, bro, this ain't good, and actually this bill is inconsistent with the current FDI policy of the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade. Also, they said, regulating flash sales doesn't entail customer welfare. Adding that the reduced prices instead promote consumer interest. They also suggested that to the Department of Consumer Affairs that the grievance redressal, including with respect to cybersecurity concern and government investigations, be left to CCI, which is basically the Competition Commissions of India, and the IT Ministry. Now, reacting to this, the Confederation of All India Traders, that is the CAIT, said that it is highly unfortunate that Niti Aayog, since its inception, has done absolutely nothing to support the 8 crore traders of India. And by the way, e-commerce retail still accounts only for 10% of retail trade in India. And they also said that, now when the government is actually trying to create a level playing field in the retail sector, the Niti Aayog is putting its nose in between and trying to derail this whole process. Now, for now, I think we will have to wait and watch what exactly happens, because the government is again looking into the draft and asking all the players involved in this whole industry and the stakeholders basically. So let's see what happens. But till then, I would actually recommend you all to read this article about the idea of open e-commerce, the link to which is present in the description. Also, an opinion piece by the Hindu on overregulation, the link for which is also present in the description. So that is it from my side, folks. If you're interested in learning about the IT rules, you can check a 2-part video series I had done earlier on what they are and had compared them to the UK laws as well. As always, please share your comments on the last 2 articles that I've linked in the description that I've asked you all to read as well, and how I can improve. If you would like to see more related content, please do subscribe. So thank you so much.